Today on CityCast Madison. It's the Friday News Roundup, and this week I'm joined by CityCast Madison's Haley Sperling and Rob Thomas. The Madison Common Council approved its capital and operating budgets for 2025. Republican challenger Eric Hovde questions outcomes in the Senate election. Black UW-Madison students receive racist post-election texts. The Wisconsin Supreme Court heard oral arguments on abortion, and the new Southside Elementary School is in the process of getting named. It's Friday, November 15th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Ready to rumble! Welcome to the Friday News Roundup, where there's still somehow election news, updates on the city budget, and some naming games for local schools, which we always love. Joining me today, of course, here is our leader of the podcast, Haley Sperling. How you doing?
Hello, we are ready to rumble.
And our newsletter editor, Rob Thomas. How goes it?
Ready to round up.
Ready to
That's
round up.
a good one.
You're
That's
so good
a
with
good
words.
Rob.
If I can only do the voice. Yeah.
Haley, you've got the story. We're going to kick off this week with the city budget.
Yeah, the city budget. It's the subject that we have been talking about for God, how long have we been talking about this? How many podcast episodes have we talked about the budget? So many. Well, here's another one, and we're kind of wrapping it all up, which is exciting. It has been a truly unprecedented budget season for Madison, and this week, City Council brought it all to a close by putting the final touches on the 2025 capital and operating budgets. So cue the round of applause there, right? So the capital budget totals at $426.5 million, and the latter, the operating budget, coming in at $432.5 million. So takes a lot of money to make a city run, and all of this goes to the services that we know and love. Of course, this finalization of the budget comes just a week after voters approved a $22 million budget referendum, the first of its kind for the city. And ultimately, the referendum passed with 57% of the vote. And if you want to know how your neighbors voted, the Cap Times actually put together this really cool interactive map that breaks down the voting results by ward. And
I was like, oh my God, that sounds so invasive. What?
I know. Well, that was also a big thing in voting advertisements, right? It was like, no one knows how you voted, but we will know if you voted.
We will know. Yeah.
We'll be watching you. But ultimately, the downtown and general Isthmus proper neighborhoods voted mostly in favor of the measure, while the neighborhoods further out, specifically on the far east and southish side, toward Monona area, and then north side toward up Wanakee, were the ones more likely to oppose the referendum. And again, city officials estimate that the referendum will cost the average homeowner in Madison roughly $230 annually. But again, this is just average. It really depends on how much your home costs. So anywho, back to the budget that we have. Some of the highlights of what was passed, because there was a lot. The budget document that the mayor put out, it's like a 288-page document, so there's a lot in it. But some of the major highlights include funding for the CARES team to continue operation in 2025. That's huge. We know that has been a major resource for the city since it launched. It includes more investment in affordable housing all around Madison. It also includes infrastructure investments, like continuing the city's Vision Zero initiative, so ending any sort of traffic deaths, and replacing aging bridges along John Nolan Drive. And kind of going briefly off topic here, but speaking of John Nolan Drive, the holiday lights at Olin Park are officially live as of November 9th. Have you guys seen them?
Yes.
Not yet.
They're gorgeous. I reject all Christmas things in November except for the holiday lights at Olin Park.
They kind of just came out of nowhere, and I'm never mad about it, right?
No.
It's just like, oh, there they are, and I love it. It's so fun. If you don't know, the holiday lights, they're up a beautiful. It's a massive display up in Olin Park. Free admission. You can drive your car through it, see all these lights. They're there through the end of the year, and it is truly like a sight to behold. Like there's just a lot of little Wisconsin Easter eggs, some Madison stuff, and it's just a fun thing. I always see it when I drive back from the gym, and I'm like, wow, I should go through it. It's fun.
Yeah, I like lights. I feel like the city has the right to feel lit up, so people are paying.
We're keeping it running. Back to the budget. At their meeting Tuesday, city council members, they also made some amendments to the mayor's initial proposed budget, which includes adding more than $100,000 for older adult services. It also voted to restore some Sunday hours at the Olin Ave drop-off site, so where you can drop off trash and recycling and brush and all that stuff. They also approved a pilot program that will implement charges for parking at some city-owned parks. And I remember I first read about this in the newsletter when Rob wrote about it. And the Parks Division is ultimately going to have to come up with the details of how these charges will work, i.e. like which parks will be included, what times, how much, etc. But ultimately, this program is set to be put into place next summer, so the summer of 2025, and then run through the rest of the year. And the city hopes that it will bring in just under like $40,000 in additional revenue. And at a time when everyone is crunched for cash, like every dollar counts. So this is kind of good, kind of exciting. I know people have hot takes on paying for parking, and I have definitely shared some on the podcast before. And my hot take is that I'm actually willing to pay more for parking. And with paying more for parking, I have become more apt to take the bus. So using those city services that we're paying for.
But
Here
does
we
that
go.
mean that you're pro? You're not necessarily, if you just stop doing it, are you really for the higher pay?
I mean, it forces you to like reevaluate your choices, right? You know, like I've been talking about this with friends at the national scale too, you know, when we talk about how tariffs will impact your shopping habits. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's going to cost more for me to get stuff from abroad, then I might as well just pay more and shop locally, or I might as well pay less and shop locally. So I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on the thing. It's habit adjustment.
Policies influencing behavior. That's the hope from
Right.
legislators.
And on it, shout out to the bus. I've been taking the bus a lot more. It's great. Again, especially when I don't have to pay for parking. You just throw money on those fast fare cards. It's great. The last big thing that I wanted to shout out is, aside from those changes that I just noted, perhaps most notably, the council also voted to restore $127,000 to the city's Police Civilian Oversight Board and the Office of the Independent Monitor, which was initially set to face a $197,000 in cuts. So it's still facing cuts, not as steep, but if you'll recall, the department has kind of been a source of controversy recently, with the city really questioning its efficacy and just saying, like, what are we doing? What are we investing our money in? The office was created following the protests of 2020 with a goal of examining police policies and just like policing in Madison in general. It's also hoping to be a outlet for residents and a way to hopefully like provide a means for folks to actually connect with police and also investigate police complaints. So we're actually going to be talking to the data analyst who is part of the Madison's Office of the Independent Monitor next week about this decision and what the office hopes to accomplish moving forward. So stay tuned for that conversation coming up. It'll be a good one. It'll be a good one.
Yes, I'm really excited to get an opportunity to talk with them again and hear what's changed. But we got a lot more news. So before we dive into more news stories, let's take a quick break. And we have more election and election adjacent news, some post-election stories that we should highlight, starting with the U.S. Senate race for Wisconsin. Senator Baldwin claimed victory in that race, as we shared, on the podcast, and I'm sure you've seen. And Eric Hovde, the 2024 Republican challenger for that seat, has yet to concede, which is his right. And he also has the right to ask for a recount if and when the state has counted and certified every vote, and it shows that he has lost by 1% or less. At this time, we're at 99% reporting, and so, the Associated Press, Fox News, NBC News all called the race for Baldwin the day after the election when we were all watching, what's going to happen, and Baldwin's lead tally is just shy of 29,000 votes, and so time will tell, like, that last 1% where they go. But Hovde's been pretty silent until this week. He broke his silence on Tuesday when he released a video where he actually started to call into question the election results, saying he was shocked at the outcome to be in the lead, and then to not be after Milwaukee recounted the ballots, basically casting dispersions on the election process. Then after he posted the video, he actually did an interview on WISN AM station saying that he had lost the election. So I saw that the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel editorial board wrote a piece basically calling out Hovde's claims as false and pretty unfair to blame Milwaukee in this situation. They said it was unfair for him to say there were, quote, irregularities, unquote, in their election process. They say it's not true. Hovde kind of called into question, saying that there was an unusual number of same-day voter registrations in certain precincts, and this piece from the editorial board was like, well, how is that improper, and feeling like maybe it was a little biased depending on the precincts that were called out. And then they also pointed out that in the video, Hovde quoted an inaccurate figure about the election, saying, because he said he was shocked on the day, and he said that Baldwin won by 90% when she actually won Milwaukee by 82%. So it just, that kind of makes it seem more dramatic. A lot of people are upset that he's casting dispersions about the election. Naturally, it was close, but I'm not shocked at if he does.
But then, like you said, he did say on a radio interview that it was the most painful loss he's ever experienced. So
right,
it seems like he
said it. He said
he lost.
Right.
So.
But then are you like cooler? Like, I lost. I didn't lose, though. The system.
I don't know. This seems like a pretty standard playbook to be like, oh, I won now when I'm leading before they counted the rest of the votes. We've seen that with other states, especially with Republicans. And you do have to count all the votes. Like, it's like you have to play 4 quarters of football. It doesn't really matter if you're ahead at the end of the third quarter. So I think he's having trouble processing this, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, I would be too, especially when you have spent millions of your own fortune on doing something like this. I also think, I mean, he can request a recount. That is well within his right. But I think calling into question just our elections and our election security and processes, like, I don't think that's going to go over as well as he thinks it will. I think it's playing out online okay, when you're in that echo chamber, when people are like, collusion, there's fraud, whatever. But especially with Donald Trump now winning the election.
By 44,000 more votes than Hovde.
Right. Like, I don't think that he's going to get that big support from anyone else saying, like, yeah, these elections are rigged because the other guys won. They don't really, what are they going to do about it? Call for a recount? No.
Yeah. I feel like everyone's having trouble processing the elections, to be fair.
No matter what side you're on, everyone's processing. Yeah. And it's a continuation, right?
Yeah. And Rob, you talked about playbooks. There's another story we're going to move to. Unfortunately, this feels like a playbook and just felt like so sickening to see a disturbing trend that hit a ton of U.S. states, just racist texts targeting Black Americans, including Black college students. Did you guys see that? Did you see any of the texts?
Yeah, they're
it's
horrific.
Disgusting. Yeah, it's disgusting. Yeah.
Yep. And so it did hit UW-Madison students. The UW-Madison Police Department released a report last Friday confirming racist texts were sent to Black students, that they were, quote, unsolicited, harassing, and racist in nature. I saw, pretty quickly after the election, a video of a mom on Instagram crying about her kid having received the message. And the messages are all pretty much the same, what I'm hearing, like, across states, like, with some variation. But they're calling for the person everyone to show up to an undisclosed location with their belongings. And some are citing because of the incoming presidential administration. The one I saw is like, show up, it's your time to go to the plantation. It's sort of sickening stuff. Multiple state and federal agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the Federal Communications Commission, are currently investigating the messages. There's no information right now if the threats are credible, but they are certainly meant to invoke fear, and it's quite disturbing.
Like, why do people do this? Like, it's just gross. It's just horrific and horrifying. And yeah, it's hard to feel like we just aren't repeating ourselves no matter what's happening here. That's, I think, truly the most frustrating part. How do we move past this?
I think people just really, when they have to feel better than someone. It's that supremacy, that sort of like, who am I if I'm not better than someone? And insecurity. And fear and there's obviously like financial consequences to keeping certain groups feeling like they're less than, there are a lot of reasons why people do this. But yeah, let's not linger too long on this. It is being investigated, and shame, tisk. But before we dive into any more news, though, we are going to take another quick break. There is a massive story in the state right now. It's the heartbeat of, the election for so many voters, and it's the right to abortion. This week, the Wisconsin Supreme Court was hearing arguments on a major case in this long-running series of cases and tug-of-war over whether Wisconsinites have the right to abortion. The court on Monday heard oral arguments in the lawsuit from Wisconsin's Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul. This lawsuit was filed back in 2022. We've talked about it a lot on the show. It's been a bit of a pause because we were waiting for the case to come before the court. It's here. And that case is versus the Republican DA of Sheboygan, Joel Urmanski. And Kaul in the case is arguing that the pre-Civil War law that bans providers from administering abortions should not be enforced. So the liberal justices are in the majority on the bench, and they're looking at this case as an opportunity to try and repeal Wisconsin's pre-Civil War era law, 1849, which I just feel like I should share as a reminder, was in use in our state for the first time in a long time, in decades, following the 22 overturn of Roe v. Wade. So it came back, it was lying dormant, and then it went into effect. And that was until last year when a Dane County Circuit judge made a ruling saying that actually this 1849 law does not pertain to abortions, but rather feticide, which means that the fetus is killed without the permission of the mother. This is tough stuff. This is tough stuff. If you're listening, it's tough to see, it's tough to hear. These are very sensitive, issues, and just giving a warning. We're gonna do a little bit more of the story because it's a top story, but I know it's even hard just to say these sorts of words without having a major reaction. There have been these have been some very heated oral arguments. Liberal justices are like really ringing the alarm, saying that if we keep this law on the books, like this is going to be extremely dangerous for women.
There would not be an exception for incest, correct?
I believe that is correct.
I fear that what you are asking this court to do is to sign the death warrants of women and children and pregnant people in this state.
That was Justice Jill Karofsky, kind of bringing to the attention that how uncommon is it for medical professionals to not be able to offer care when someone is in danger. And, another liberal on the court, Rebecca Dallett, said this.
So in 1849, we're talking about a time when the only people that had rights were white men, correct? With property. White men who own property, sorry.
So, a lot of passion. And, obviously there are conservatives on the court who pushed back. One saying in their questioning, well, has the law ever been dictated by someone's gender or race in Wisconsin? Like, do you know that? And Urmanski's lawyer said, I don't believe so. And that justice was Justice Rebecca Bradley. And we've got some audio from another conservative justice, Brian Hagedorn.
The law's still there. It's still there. The judiciary doesn't get to edit laws. The judiciary doesn't get to rewrite them. We didn't delete it.
It's passionate audio, and we won't know how they'll decide on this case at the very earliest in the coming weeks, if not months. The decision could come down early 2025. I do want to flag that there's another case that is currently before the court, Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin versus Joel Urmanski, which is basically looking at the Supreme Court asking them to decide if the Wisconsin Constitution protects the right to abortion access. So that's just before the court. And it's very emotional. It's hard for me to even share this story, but it's important.
And we've got another election coming up, don't we, related to Supreme Courts?
Yeah, there's another seat up for the nonpartisan election on April 1st of next year. So, there will be a new person.
That's liberal justice Ann Walsh Bradley's retiring, right? So that would, again, right now the progressives have the majority on the court, but that would flip it back if
it's going to be another massive race. It's going to be another
a lot of money is going to
one.
be spent, and it's a lot at stake for sure.
100%. Well, can't wait for that. At least we get a couple of months of holiday lights.
Holiday lights. And back to the city level, of course, we're all impacted by what happens with those cases. There is fun happening in our schools.
Yeah, the city's imagination has been captured by the naming process for the new what's called the Southside Elementary School, which is a temporary name for what used to be Frank Alice. But the school moved into a new building on East Badger Road. And the school's trying to come up with a new permanent name. And so the district, as they do, turned to the community to nominate ideas for new names for the school. And they got a whopping 175 suggestions.
Woo!
Which is the most of any school naming process the district has had in the past.
That's a lot. And we've been renaming a lot of schools.
Right.
They don't need to ask for another 2 decades.
You think about what happened with Memorial was quite a charged issue. This one has been less charged, I think. But so the school board does put sort of limits on names, like they're supposed to be named after a prominent figure who is deceased, a locally specific place or geographical site, or some kind of civic virtue. And so some people went that way, and popular ideas for naming the school were naming it after former Wisconsin Chief Justice Shirley Abramson, and also community leader Lori Mann Carey, who founded the scholarship and after-school programs. And Carey is the clear front-runner. Over 50 people suggested that she be named after school. But then other people thought outside the box. Some people suggested wild names like Schoolie McSchoolface.
A classic.
And sort of a variant, the Schoolie McSchoolerson.
Okay.
And then Big
That's
Chunk.
prettier.
You like it? It feels more formal somehow than School Face, I think. And then, of course, Big Chungus Elementary. And I have to confess, I had no idea what I thought that was just a random name. And then I posted on Slack, and all of you younger colleagues knew what that was.
I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
That was probably a highlight of my life. I was teaching Rob Thomas what Big Chungus is.
I in fact got schooled on Big Chungus. So it was a learning opportunity. Maybe that makes it the best name because people can learn. And I still don't really understand. It's like a meme involving a rabbit, or I don't know.
It's just, he's basically,
character.
He's just like a chubby Bugs Bunny. That's what he is.
He's chunky.
Yeah,
He's
chunky.
Chungus. Okay.
Yeah. So tragically, Big Chungus did not make the cut with the 11-member naming committee. Apparently, it's not a civic virtue. So they recommended 4 finalists. They recommend, I don't think they've done it yet, 4 finalists to the school board, and the school board will make the final decision. So Big Chungus is still available if we can figure out a way to name a school after it. I think I would be a proud graduate of Big Chungus Elementary, and I don't know. Do you think that the school district's being kind of a killjoy by having all these narrow criteria for a name, or do we need guardrails so nobody goes to Skibbity Toilet Middle School in the future?
Oh, God. I think it's exactly that. I think we do need the guardrails. I mean, my favorite thing about the Big Chungus situation is that, like, in the reasoning, I was looking at, all the documents and whatnot, because that's what journalists do. Their reasoning behind it was just, quote, everyone loves Big Chungus. But yeah, no, I think that guidelines are important, especially when it comes to something like schools. We want our schools to be named after people, places, and things that are virtuous and have big value. And honestly, the next 2 years, like, Big Chungus will be replaced by some other crazy meme that no one needs to talk about. And it just keeps going.
Oh, I love it. Civic
I'm
virtue.
obsessed.
I have to say, I met, since we were just talking about the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Shirley Abramson. She looked at me up and down. She said, "You look like you could do anything."
Wow.
On Martin Luther King Day. And I'm like, I don't think you know how important that is.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. All right. So, sorry, Big Chungus.
Civic leader. Oh, but not everyone's so civic.
No, not everyone is so civic. This is a story, again, this is another one of those stories that I've been kind of waiting to bring to you guys. And it's a story that you'd read about in tabloids. So naturally, I thought it was the perfect way to wrap up this little show of ours. Earlier this month, a top Epic employee was arrested for essentially being drunk and belligerent on a plane. Karl Dvorak was on a flight from Detroit to Madison when airline staff asked him to deplane for being noticeably drunk. And he didn't like that. Dvorak, he refused to get off the plane and became unruly, prompting a police response, according to WMTV 15. And apparently, this is my favorite part of the story, a passenger sitting a couple rows behind him overheard Dvorak ask flight attendants, "Do you know who I am?" And Delta employees responded by saying, "Yes, Mr. Dvorak, we do." So, because one, I mean, it's literally their job to know everyone's name on the flight, but
That's
also
true.
it's like, girl, we get it. You're a frequent flyer. If you don't know who Karl Dvorak is, that's okay. I think most people don't, and that's just fine. But you might remember Mr. Dvorak as the Epic executive who, back in 2020, when discussing the company's DEI priorities, said, quote, "It's okay to have passions, but not here. This isn't the platform to fight for your social cause." So we don't need to open that can of worms, but this man has been in the headlines before is all I'm trying to say. Ultimately, everyone had to get off the plane, and Dvorak was later seen being let out in handcuffs. He has since apologized for his behavior, and shockingly, the whole ordeal only delayed the flight by an hour. So that's some good news there.
Mm-hmm. Well, now they know who he is for sure.
Now we all know.
Yeah. Do you know who I am? Well, as typical, total mixed bag on people being disappointed and people having their budget fulfilled. We've got everything in this roundup. And I feel like we should say we have a new producer job. Do you like audio? Do you love your city of Madison shenanigans, happenings, news, politics, coffee? Frank Lloyd Wright.
Budgets, water, city news. It's all exciting.
Education.
Yes.
Cocktails,
Education.
sports, buildings. Yeah.
If you're interested in working with us, you absolutely should apply. Go check out our show notes for a link to that application and give her a rip. Thanks for rounding up the news with me this week, y'all. Haley Sperling, I'll see you later.
See ya.
And Rob Thomas, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bianca.
That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. We're produced by Adam Sage and Francisco Kilgore. Haley Sperling is our executive producer. Our theme music is by Carl Christensen. Rob Thomas is our newsletter editor. Don't forget, you can always get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to Madison Minutes. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with one of the politicos in your life? See you back here Monday morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, have a good weekend.
On the schoolyard, it's Big Chungus to us. Yeah, right.